Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the weird and strange and unusual literature that I found in my travels across Mexico. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, a lovely day of the week where I talk about the short form literature that I've encountered. That might be weird, might be normal, kind of like Poetry Thursday, but you know, more often than not, it has a bit of an unusual, out of the ordinary tinge to it, which I enjoy. Today, I wanted to talk about a collection of short stories, with one particular short story about a notorious drug lord who comes to a restaurant for dinner, and a chef who uses unusual ingredients in his meal. I am talking about Mexico by Josh Barkan, which is a collection of short stories about Mexico, specifically the bad stuff of Mexico. And the specific short story that I want to talk about is called The Chef and El Chapo. Again, this is by Josh Barkan. I looked him up. He's a writer. He has a couple of books under his belt, including another one about short stories from Japan about pre-Hiroshima. Probably told with all the nuance that you'll find in this book. He splits his time between living in Virginia and living in Mexico with his wife, and he writes about Mexico. He talks about Mexico. I think I saw an article titled to like Donald Trump, like addressing to him on Medium, where it was like, this is what Donald Trump doesn't know about Mexico. And it's like, Donald Trump doesn't care about Mexico. He's going to slander it whether he knows about it or not. So, we don't need to be writing those articles. Maybe we do, though, to demystify Mexico and talk about how it actually is. He's also won a number of awards, including for this book, or at least he was nominated for those awards for this book. That's the context for which we find this story. Interestingly, I picked this up from the library, and the first thing I noticed was it's called Mexico, so it's probably a bunch of stories about Mexico, but it's written by a guy named Josh, which is very unusual. I'm not saying you have to be Mexican to write about Mexico. You can tell a very fine story about Mexico or Mexican natives without coming off as offensive. John Steinbeck did, for example, in The Pearl, which is a very lovely story that paints the desperation of a Mexican man as he tries to provide for his family. I think it's a wonderful story, and I talked about it in another video. Go find that if you can. Does Josh handle this effectively? The short answer is no, and I'll get to the long answer in just a bit. Let's talk about The Chef and El Chapo, which we will do a little summary, a little analysis, and we will move on from there. The Chef and El Chapo focuses on an unnamed chef who is at his restaurant during business hours when the notorious drug lord El Chapo stops by for a visit to eat his dinner. His gunmen, like his bodyguards, show up and are just like, everybody, give us your purses, give us your information. Don't bother leaving. Finish your meals. El Chapo will pay for your meals once he's done here, and then you may leave as well, so that we know no one's going to go to the police. Everyone just kind of follows that, and the chef notices that this is another one of El Chapo's stunts. He's flaunting his wealth and his invincibility against the law by showing up to a restaurant in the middle of the city to make sure that no one and like show that like he's untouchable in a lot of ways. El Chapo goes to the chef and demands a meal, a specific meal. Like he's kind of offended that the chef is dressed casually and doesn't exude like professionalism, which is rich coming from a drug dealer. But like he's like, okay, so if you're so good, like I've heard a lot of good things about this place, but I've yet to see anything good about this place. Cook me a meal with only 2 ingredients, or else, I might kill you and all your customers. And the chef, like, he's hesitant, but he agrees to it because he thinks of his family, his son, I think Johnny, and his wife, who's also unnamed, who he loves, and he's like, okay, I gotta provide for them, so I gotta make sure that El Chapo gets the meal that he deserves. The chef decides that El Chapo, he in a weird statement, he says that people like to eat themselves in a weird way, they like the meat that reminds them of them. So he decides to give El Chapo some rough meat. He wanted to provide buffalo or even human, but that would mean chopping himself up. So he decides to provide the roughest meat he can find, and then he squeezes his own blood from his thumb onto the meat. Unfortunately, he finds that it's a little salty, so he decides to go out and get a child from the restaurant, bring their mother into the kitchen, and is like, listen, I know this sounds weird, but I gotta provide a great meal for El Chapo where everyone dies, so I need to cut your child's finger and squeeze some blood onto this food, which is very unusual, but like the mother is hesitant and the child cries, but like he uses a towel to prevent her from crying, and he cuts her thumb, which is terrifying, and squeezes it on the food. He serves it to El Chapo and his bodyguards, El Chapo and the bodyguards absolutely love it. So like it seems like the chef has kind of saved the day, but when El Chapo asks, like, how did you make this? He says, oh, I used my own blood and some meat because you only wanted 2 ingredients, and I figured that would be good to your palate. And El Chapo is like a little self-righteous here. He's like, whoa, you consider me a bad person, like you view me as a cannibal, but I'm a good person just like everyone else. I'm like, first of all, no, you're fucking not. Pardon me for my language, but he says that people like view him through this stereotype, and he's not so bad as he would just drink human blood. Although he says he did like it, so you know that. But he made a deal with the chef. He was like, I told you I would give you a good tip if you made a good meal, and you did. So after squeezing his thumb, he marks some of the chef's blood on a pile of money in a briefcase, and he's like, there, now we're connected by blood because we're both in the blood business now, or something like that. And then El Chapo leaves, and everyone is fine. But like a week later, the chef shows up to a museum that has Aztec relics at it, and he doesn't know what to do with the briefcase of money. And he's with his son, and he's like, "Here, son, take this briefcase of money and go put it on the Aztec sacrificial idol." I'm not quite clear what maybe he's trying to justify keeping the money or as a way of giving it to the museum. But his son takes it up there, and then his son, because he's young, he's like, it's pretty cool up here. I don't want to come down. The story ends with the chef remarking how security's coming and they have to get out of here soon before they see that the child is playing on top of the Aztec pyramid thing. So that's the end of that. So let's get to the first thing, the good parts about the story. In terms of analysis, I like how near the end, Chapo remarks that they share a blood guilt based on how they spill a lot of blood in their business. Although that's kind of true because the chef did take a child's blood and he poured it over some money, and so in a lot of ways, El Chapo and the chef, they spilled blood in order to find some success in their business. However, it is completely false because El Chapo is making a false equivalency. As far as he knows, the chef spilled his own blood, and spilling your own blood on food and having like a terrible person eat it isn't nearly as bad as going around selling drugs, ruining lives, bribing officials, and killing people to prevent competition in your line of work. He's making a false equivalency there, which like typical drug dealers, committing logical fallacies. But I do like that it throws into question how El Chapo and the chef are like connected now, and I do appreciate that Josh tried to make that connection there. Another thing that I noticed was the sacrifice at the end, the whole idea of ritual sacrifice that kind of plays throughout the story. You have the Aztec sacrifice at the end, where the character remarks that the Aztecs enjoyed using young blood because it felt more pure in a way, less corrupted by bad mistakes probably made as they got older. Allow me to read to you a section that highlights that. Young victims were always considered the most worthwhile for placating the gods. They had more potential energy for the rest of their lives stored within, so they were believed to be the most valuable offerings. So right there you see that him highlighting how you have to sacrifice the young to the gods, and you see that in a way in the story with the chef offering a sacrifice of the young girl to El Chapo, who in a way could be viewed as a god. The media certainly deifies him, and he has a large amount of power in Mexico because of his reach and because of his money. So you see an example there of ritual sacrifice, including the chef trying to sacrifice himself at first, but that doesn't work, so he considers the young. Another good example of this is again at the very end of the short story, where the character talks about how his son went up there and didn't want to come back down from the altar. You could view this in a way as the gods sort of taking that child away for what he did to the young girl. He sacrificed that young girl, so in exchange the gods are taking away his son and not letting him come down from the altar. It would certainly make sense given that he just talked about how the young are viewed as prime ritual sacrifices. Depending on how you view the story, this got really dark at the end, and he's about to lose his son. Of course, you could also view it as the young boy just being a young boy and not wanting to come down from the pyramid that he's on. That's certainly happier, although there's still the threat of the security guard finding them out. But there is a lot of bad with the short story. The first is that El Chapo seems like a caricature, and it's very weird that Josh Barkan would make a real life character into the story when he could have used any other fictional drug dealer to tell the same story. And then not only did he use El Chapo, but he didn't give him any personality. He just made him into the bad guy who uses his power to harm others. And it's I don't like it. The story needed a little more depth to work out. Now, given I did enjoy the short story, it was well written, and the plot was interesting. It's just the character didn't hold up. And then there's another problem. And the other problem is that the context that the story takes place in within the other short stories. So the very first short story is about, a drug dealer coming to a restaurant and the chef having to deal with that. The second short story is about a weird teacher who follows their students around and listens in on them having sex, even though that teacher was told to separate those two students. It's very weird. And then there's a whole bunch of other short stories that just feature about how Mexico is in a bad place, and it's about drug dealers and corrupt officials and terrible, like a terrible situation that highlights the worst of Mexico right now. So my problem with this short story is not the story in of itself, but the fact that Josh Barkan took the time to highlight everything that was going wrong with Mexico, and he only presents one side of Mexico. So he's painting a picture with this book by saying Mexico is a bad place, and it's a hellscape, and anyone who goes there might die, or they might be corrupted in some sort of way. Now, why would that be a problem? Well, for one, like, he's just a white dude who spends like maybe a small amount of time in Mexico, and he chose to write about the worst parts of Mexico when he might not understand the entirety of Mexican culture, and he's not even trying to write about the Mexican experience himself. Like, one of the stories I think is about a Mexican citizen who comes out as gay, but that character is also written to be a stereotype. So not only is he ruining like one subset of culture, he's also like completely turning gays into a stereotype as well. Because in the story, like the gay character was raped by a Mexican priest, which is unfortunate, and like I think it definitely it comes off like that stereotype where like people are only gay because they had a bad experience in their youth or something like that, they were raped or something. So it falls into those old stereotypes and trappings that I don't think help this book at all. And it's especially bad because of the time period we're living in, where the president, the very racist president, is saying that like people from Mexico that are trying to immigrate here are bad people, and Mexico is only sending their worst, and many of them are rapists, and he's saying a lot of terrible things, and this book plays right into that. And that's not good. Like, I feel like there's a way to do what Josh Barkan was trying to do without coming off like you're playing into offensive stereotypes that paint an entire country as hostile. A good example of doing this right is Everything Inside, which I talked about 2 weeks ago. Go find that video. It's a wonderful book. But Edwidge Danticat, possibly because she's from Haiti, like she wrote about how Haiti was in a bad place, and of course, like Haiti is in a bad place. But she also wrote about hope, and she wrote about maybe Haiti would be in a better place in the future, and there was a lot of love for that country. There doesn't seem to be any love of Mexico here. There seems to be a lot of hatred, and it's terrible that Josh Barkan chose to write about that. I think this, like, for this to be like out there, like, I got this from the library. Imagine how many people like check this out from the library and like expecting to read about Mexico, and instead they find like a terrible place, and this might guide their opinion of Mexico. It's irresponsible. It's terrible. I'm not saying to just paint Mexico as a happy place. I'm saying put a mixture there, show what's really happening, and I don't think Josh Barkan was the right person to do that. I'm very frustrated about this book because of the irresponsibility of only painting Mexico as a lawless kind of wasteland. I feel like a better author would have done a much better job while not leaning into stereotypes and making immigration possibly harder for Mexican nationals. So that was my review of Mexico, stories by Josh Barkan. A bunch of short stories that are very interesting. See, that's the problem. Like, they're very interesting, but they don't hold up because of, again, the context surrounding it. I think I don't recommend this. Maybe read the first story that I mentioned and then never talk about this book again. If you disagree with me about this book, or you disagree about what I said about Mexico or anything like that, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you. And it would be pretty interesting to have a conversation about that kind of thing. Otherwise, like, share, and subscribe so that other people may find out how terrible Josh Barkan is as a writer. And so, we can possibly find better literature about Mexico. Also, if you have an example of a book that might be better to read about Mexico, comment below. I would hope that other people can find that book. Otherwise, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Mexican-y travels. Farewell.